Hello, this is Reality, and we're going to talk about politics. Before anything else, we would like to understand what politics really is. So, politics in its concepts of politics and governance, the concept of what is really politics and governance. So, what is politics? If we're going to define what politics is, it is a science or art of political government. It is all about governance, the art or science concerned with guiding or influencing governmental policy. So it is more concerning on policy making. It is also an art or a science concerned with winning and holding control over government, which what we call as election. So everything involving around government, policy making, and election are considered politics. So what are the boundaries of politics? There are certain boundaries of politics. So what is a boundary or boundaries of politics? It is a political boundary is an imaginary line separating one political unit such as a country or state from another. Sometimes these align with a natural geographic feature like a river to form a border or barrier between nations. Occasionally, two countries may contest where a particular border is drawn. So, in short, this boundary, political boundary, is what we call as jurisdiction. So, it also involves around as to what extent can a political power be exercised, or in what way are these boundaries being formed. So there are certain types of boundaries. First, relic boundaries, antecedent boundaries, superimposed boundaries, subsequent boundaries, consequent boundaries, and geometric boundaries. So what is a real relic boundary? A relic boundary is one that no longer functions but can be detected or the culture on the cultural landscape. So it is no longer functional. So what is an example of this relic boundary? So an example is the Berlin Wall. It is built in 1961 by Soviet-controlled East Germany to contain the portion of the city that has been given over to America, England, and France to administer. So these lines are the path of Berlin Walls, these yellow lines. So these the blue, the green, and the yellow are given portions to France, England, and America. So this red here is the Soviet sector. It's relic boundaries. It's already so old, so it's no longer functional. How about an antecedent boundary? So what is an antecedent boundary? An antecedent boundary existed before the present settlement. These are often based on landforms such as mountains. So there are also boundaries that are formed by natural resources like mountains or river, like the picture. So in this picture, the boundary is a river. It is separating Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil. So it is the Andes Mountains form the eastern boundary of Chile, separating it from neighboring Argentina and Bolivia. So it is also separated by river and mountain. How about superimposed boundary? A superimposed boundary or drawn on an area by a conquering or colonizing power that ignores existing cultural patterns. So these boundaries drawn through conquering. So in 1885, European states met in Berlin to divide up the continent of Africa among themselves, paying little to no heed to tribal territories. So when conquerors arrive to a certain country, they're going to divide that certain country into territories between themselves to be ruled among themselves. So without uh, disregarding tribal territories or like for example the United States of America. The natives there are native Indians, but they are colonized by Britain and it is distributed to British colony, distributed to British states. In the Philippines also, when the conquerors arrived, we are solely being governed by Spain. But when Americans arrived, there are portions of the Philippines that are governed by Spain. There are portions of the Philippines that are governed by United States of America. So that and the Filipinos are being disregarded because they are considered as conquered people. Subsequent boundaries. Subsequent boundary are established after the settlement in an area. It changes as the cultural landscape changes and is drawn to accommodate developments due to a certain event such as war. So a subsequent boundary is already established after settlement in an area. Take for example in the Philippines, when the first people step in the Philippines, it is solid one territory. But when other people already reach the Philippines, it is already divided into like tribes according to culture. So we have Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Luzon, where Imperial Manila is, Visayas, where more on Visayan culture, and Mindanao is exclusive for Islamic culture. Although there are also Christians, but Mindanao is really has an exclusive Islamic culture. An example also is the Yugoslavia or the Yugoslav Federation. So before it is solid Yugoslavian Federation under Hungary and Romania, but in 2006 Slovenia separated from Croatia and Hungary and Romania. So Yugoslavia was formed following World War I by the merger of several territories. Economic and political unrest in the 1980s led to much fighting, and eventually Yugoslavia was split into separate states. So before the war, before the war, Yugoslavia was solid one state. But then after political war, it is already separated into different states. Consequent boundaries are drawn in order to separate groups based on ethnic, religious, or economic differences. The boundary between India and current-day Pakistan was created to separate the main religions in the region, Hindu and Islam. So before it is solid, it's uh, one Pakistan, and after that it is slowly divided into according to religion. Like for example, the Philippines, mostly in the Philippines, in the Luzon is are those who are natives like uh, Ifugaos, like that. In the Visayas, we are middle people. Like, we are diverse people. In Mindanao, most people in Mindanao are Muslims or practicing Islam. The portion of British India that was predominantly Muslim was split off and became Pakistan. So in Pakistan is solid Islamic state. Many Hindus who found themselves in the newly formed Muslim state migrated across a new boundary into India. So that's why Pakistan is a solid Muslim state and India is a solid Hindu state. Geometric boundaries. Not all boundaries are created with concern for physical or cultural difference. Geometric boundaries are drawn using straight lines. So this is a Canadian boundary. This boundary, these red lines, is the boundary between the United States and Canada. So one of the longest geometric boundaries is the United States-Canada border. Much of the boundary was drawn in the 49th parallel but is not as straight as it should be. There was no GPS when the border was demarcated, and the line zigzags by an average of almost 300 feet. In addition to the unintentional zigzags, there are other idiosyncrasies along the border. So it is supposed to be a straight line, but then there's no GPS before. That's why it became like that. Right now, the boundary was planted by trees, so the main boundary was all trees, so it is separated by forest trees. So that's all for lesson 1. The next lesson will be uh, how to study politics according as a discipline in political science.